The next step is to get all the materials out that we need to mix our paints. So what we're aiming for is a range of values in 9 steps. I started off with titanium white and ivory black. You don't need large tubes like this. These just are in my supplies. What I have is a very inexpensive plastic palette. You don't need one of these, but it helps to have something rigid. I also like to have a bunch of these laying around if I'm going to paint. You get these obviously free from the post office. This is Tyvek, right? So this material doesn't rip and it's waterproof, right? So these are ideal to use for mixing paint rather than buying the palette paper. The palette paper just falls apart. Okay, so these are free. They're very versatile, and you can also clean them off pretty easily and reuse them because they're waterproof. So what you need are some sort of a palette. I like to use the Tyvek. Paper towels, white and black acrylic. I use ivory black and titanium white. A flat brush for painting the acrylic onto the scale. The palette knife is for mixing the paint. You don't mix the paint with the brush, you mix it with the palette knife. A spray bottle, right? Because when you're mixing your piles, if you spray the piles a little bit with water, not a lot, it'll keep them from drying out. And a clean container of water. So before I do anything, I'm going to mix my paints. As you can see, I just put that rigid palette inside of my Tyvek. You want to start off with your piles of paint. So I'm going to start off with enough paint that I can get through mixing the whole thing. I did a practice run, so I know that I need a little bit more paint than what I started off with. You don't need a bunch. I mean, that is a pretty big pile because I want to make sure that I get through the whole demo. Make sure you have your paper towel handy. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a chunk of white, and you want to take enough so that you can mix your values in between. So wipe your knife clean, make sure it's completely clean. You're going to dip into your black, and you're going to take about an equal amount of black. With the palette knife, you can mix this all together. This will be your 50% gray. Now I'm gonna end up making a little bit too much, but I don't want to have to remix my colors. So you'll learn in the process of doing your value scale, you'll learn a little bit about the amounts of paint that you need to use when you start to paint an image. Okay, so there's my 50% gray. Now I'm going to I need to mix white and gray together in the middle here, and then make sure you clean off your knife. Okay, so I'm going to take part of this, put it here. Now I'm able to be a little bit rougher with the Tyvek because it's waterproof and it's basically some sort of a plastic material. So I don't need to worry about being too delicate with it. If you're using palette paper, you can't be that rough. So I split this into 3 piles, and now I'm going to add half white to this first pile, and that's going to be my lightest value. And with this pile, I'm going to mix half of this, half and half. You're making the middle value between these two in one pile. And then this is the one you split into 3 piles. And then you'll mix 50% of this with 50% of that. This stays that value, and then we'll mix 50% black with this. And then I have to just add more black to my black end. Okay. So my acrylics are pretty wet still, so I didn't need to spray them with water, spritz them, because they're still pretty wet. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in and do my value scale. So with the brush, you want to make sure you dip the brush in water first. So just get it a little bit wet first. And then make sure to blot it dry. And it's better to use a clean paper towel so you're not getting any grays on it. I'm going to go ahead and start off with my white. And try to stay in the lines. So okay, so that's my white. You're going to need to clean your brush, so put it in the water, clean it out completely, and blot it dry again. So now I'm going to use my next value. You don't need a bunch of paint on your brush. Too much paint, you're going to get too many streaks. And then just delicately try to stay in the lines. This is why we made the squares 1 1/4, so you have enough room to fit that brush in there. Clean your brush. It's okay if it's not perfect. You're learning, okay? So you learn by doing. So try to follow the best you can. But don't stress out if it's not going your way, because you're also you're learning these techniques, but you're also teaching yourself motor skills to be able to handle the tools in a particular way in order to achieve what you desire. You want to make sure that you don't have any white of the paper showing through between the values. Clean your brush. Now I'm blotting this over my paper because I'm using it for the camera, but you obviously don't want to blot over your piece. And then just keep track. Count if you need to. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So I'm on to 4. So I'm going to grab this 4th value. Clean my brush. Here's the 5th value. Ah. Have no fear if you make a mistake. Mistakes happen. Mistakes are part of the learning process, okay? But let me I would just kind of pull this up, blot it off. Not a big deal, okay? We're gonna cut this value scale out when we're done, so it's okay if it went a little bit past. So I'm gonna clean my brush, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm gonna go back to my 4th pile, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just pick up a little bit more of that paint and then put this back. Okay, not a big deal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I count so I don't lose track. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. That looks black because of the lighting, but it's not. It's a gray. See that? It's a gray. So then I want to put black here. Okay, you see that? That is your full scale. Now you want to just set that aside and let it dry. And then clean up your mess. Look at all this excess paint I have left over. So let me show you how to deal with that. Okay, so there's 2 ways that I might, well, here's 2 ways that I might deal with that. I have these jars because I'm an artist and I'm an art professor, right? And so I have these kinds of things in my storage for doing demos. Okay, so I don't expect you to have these glass jars, but they're ideal for storing mixed paint so that you don't waste your paint. These you can get from any Mexican restaurant, and a lot of Mexican restaurants also have lids, or even the smaller ones, right? Smaller than this with lids. I don't have lids for these, but you can take your paint and store it in these. So again, I am working over my drawing, my scale, because I don't have any space and I'm doing a demo, so I want you to see what I'm doing. You don't want to work over your space like that. This is where the water comes in, right? So you want to spritz this, right? Just add a little moisture, not a bunch, just a little moisture. And then I'm probably going to just stick this into a Ziploc bag. It's the 2 value. So I'm going to go ahead and just label the bottom of it 2 so I know what value it is, right? 2, right? Stick it in a little Ziploc bag. I went ahead and put 4 and 5 together. So you see how I sprayed a little bit in the cup on top of the paint, but I'm also just going to spray a little bit on the baggie so that I'm not getting too much water on the paint, but there's enough moisture in that baggie to hold that paint. Paper towels, I didn't use the blue shop towels, But you can actually reuse these. You can rinse them out. If you're delicate, most paper towels now, if you forget and leave them in your pocket in the washer, you notice they come out. But instead of throwing these away, I'm just going to rinse them. I'm going to soak them and rinse them and wring them out delicately and lay them out to dry so I can use them again. I'm also going to rinse this off. Instead of just throwing this away, I'm going to go ahead and just rinse it off under the faucet and wash all that off and let it dry. So this is all my paper towels that I washed and wringed out and laid out to dry. You see I cleaned the palette. I washed it with one of the paper towels completely off and it's stained, but the integrity of the surface is exactly the same. So you can just reuse this over and over again, and you can really reuse these pretty much over and over again, right? So even though it's stained, it's not clumped on there, right? So if you're worried about waste, which you should be, that is how you handle it. Make sure you also wash off your brush really thorough with water, and you can use soap and water, and then you want to press it back to its original form and let it dry, pressed back in its original form. Make sure you clean off your palette knife so that it stays and lasts forever and doesn't get acrylic caked onto it.